The moment he noticed her, she was standing alone in a crowd worth more than his entire lifetime of earnings combined. Crystal glasses shimmered beneath the afternoon sun. Laughter drifted through the manicured garden, like music meant only for those fluent in wealth. Tailored suits and silk dresses brushed past one another in polite choreography. Conversations about investments, foundations, and global initiatives floated easily through the air. And in the middle of it all stood a little girl in a pale blue dress. Her small hands were clenched tightly at her sides. Her chin was lifted in practiced composure, but her eyes betrayed her. People passed in front of her, around her, near her, but never truly to her. They weren't cruel. No one pointed. No one whispered insults. It was worse than that. They simply didn't see her. And in that instant, something cracked open inside Mateo Alvarez's chest, because he knew exactly what it felt like to be invisible. Mateo hadn't planned to attend the charity luncheon that afternoon. The invitation had come to the community center, where he volunteered part-time, whenever he could squeeze in the hours between shifts. A local foundation needed extra hands for setup and coordination. They were offering a modest stipend, modest to them, groceries for the week to him, maybe even fresh fruit instead of canned. So Mateo had shown up early, sleeves rolled up, focus steady. He worked quietly, arranging chairs, adjusting table linens, carrying trays. He kept his eyes on the job, not on the luxury vehicles gliding into the circular driveway. The venue overlooked a sprawling private garden, perfectly sculpted hedges framing a wide lawn. White linen tables glowed beneath the sunlight. The air carried the faint scent of roses, an expensive perfume. Everything felt polished, curated, intentional. Everything felt like someone else's world. 3 years earlier, Mateo's life had been simpler, hard, but shared. His wife's sudden passing from an undiagnosed medical condition had left no time for preparation. One day, she was laughing at breakfast. The next, he was signing hospital paperwork with hands that didn't feel like his own. Grief didn't arrive in waves for him. It settled into his bones like a constant hum, quiet, persistent, never fully gone. He carried it while packing school lunches, while tying shoelaces, while kneeling beside a small bed to read bedtime stories. His 6-year-old son, Nico, had been born with moderate hearing loss. Learning sign language hadn't been a choice. It had been survival. Mateo had stayed up late after double shifts watching online lessons, replaying tutorials, practicing hand shapes in the bathroom mirror until his fingers ached. He refused to let his son ever feel alone inside his own home. Over time, signing stopped being something he practiced. It became something he felt, a language of love more than communication. And now, standing in a sea of wealth and influence, he saw that same loneliness flickering in the little girl's eyes across the lawn. She couldn't have been older than 8. Her dress was elegant, carefully chosen. Her hair was styled perfectly. She looked like she belonged in the setting, but her shoulders were tight, guarded. Adults approached the group around her with warmth and excitement. They shook hands with a man beside her, tall, composed, impeccably dressed. Mateo overheard someone murmur the name Victor Langston, a billionaire investor, a philanthropist, a man whose presence commanded attention. But when guests turned toward the girl, something shifted. Smiles faltered, brows lifted uncertainly. Some attempted exaggerated gestures. Others offered stiff nods before redirecting their attention to her father. A few avoided her entirely. Each interaction dimmed her expression just a little more. Mateo didn't need confirmation. He knew she was deaf, and no one around her knew how to bridge the silence. He had seen that exact look on playgrounds when Nico stood near other children who didn't know how to include him. Not mean, not malicious, just unsure. And uncertainty creates distance faster than cruelty ever could. Mateo watched for several minutes, trays forgotten in his hands. He felt a quiet war inside himself. This wasn't his place. He was staff, temporary help, invisible in a different way. But then the girl's eyes drifted over the crowd and landed briefly on him. And he saw it, resignation. Without allowing himself time to reconsider, Mateo set the tray down and crossed the lawn slowly. He made sure his steps were unhurried, non-threatening. When he reached her, he knelt so he wouldn't tower above her. He offered a gentle smile. Then he raised his hands. He signed a simple greeting. "Hello, my name is Matteo." The transformation was immediate. Her eyes widened in stunned disbelief. Her breath caught. Then her shoulders dropped as if someone had lifted a heavy weight from them. She responded eagerly, her hands moving quickly, beautifully. "Hi, I'm Arya." Her expression shifted from guarded to radiant in seconds. Matteo kept his movement steady and clear, mindful not to rush. He told her he had a son who signed too, that Nico was 6, that he loved superheroes and drawing. Arya's hands flew as she asked questions, her excitement building with every exchange. For the first time that afternoon, she wasn't alone. What Matteo didn't realize was that across the garden, Victor Langston had stopped mid-conversation, and he was watching everything. Victor had spent years trying to protect his daughter, Arya, from the world's misunderstandings. He had hired tutors, specialists, speech therapists, consultants. He had purchased state-of-the-art hearing technology and funded accessibility research. Money had never been the obstacle. Connection was. Social events were always the hardest. People either treated Arya like she was fragile glass, or they avoided interacting with her altogether out of discomfort. But now, a man in a simple button-down shirt and worn shoes was speaking to her as if there were no difference to overcome. No hesitation, no performance, just respect. Matteo and Arya spoke for nearly 20 minutes. She showed him a drawing she had tucked inside a small folder, an elaborate sketch of a garden with bright exaggerated flowers and 2 children standing beneath a tree. She described every detail in expressive signs. Matteo responded with enthusiasm, asking questions, praising her imagination. She laughed, openly. The sound carried across the lawn, drawing curious glances. Victor felt something tighten unexpectedly in his throat. He hadn't heard that sound in public in a long time. Finally, he excused himself from his conversation and walked toward them. Matteo noticed him approaching and immediately straightened, assuming he had overstepped. Perhaps he wasn't supposed to interact with guests. Perhaps this would cost him the small payment he'd counted on. Victor stopped in front of him. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Victor signed, carefully, imperfectly, but sincerely. "Thank you." Matteo blinked in surprise. Victor's voice, when he spoke aloud, carried emotion that didn't match his powerful reputation. "I've never seen her that comfortable at one of these events." Matteo shook his head lightly. "She's easy to talk to. She's had a lot to say." Victor glanced at his daughter, who was animatedly explaining something about superheroes now. "Yes," he murmured softly, "she does." That afternoon ended without ceremony. Matteo returned to his tasks. The luncheon concluded. Cars departed. He assumed that would be the end of it. He was wrong. A week later, Matteo received a phone call from an unfamiliar number during his break between shifts. He almost ignored it, but something nudged him to answer. The voice on the other end was calm, professional. Victor Langston. He explained that Arya had not stopped talking about the man who signed with her in the garden. She had drawn another picture, this time of 2 children and a man beneath a tree, hands raised mid-conversation. Victor hesitated only slightly before making his request. Would Matteo consider spending occasional afternoons with Arya? Informal conversation. Real-world practice beyond structured lessons. Matteo's first instinct was to decline. His schedule was already stretched thin between 2 jobs and caring for Nico. Time wasn't something he possessed in abundance. But then Victor mentioned compensation, enough to allow Matteo to reduce his second job hours. It wasn't charity. It was employment, meaningful employment. Matteo agreed, not because of the money, though it would help, but because he had seen what that connection meant. The first afternoon Arya visited the community center to meet Nico, something extraordinary happened. There was no awkward introduction, no explanation needed. 2 children looked at each other and signed. Within minutes, they were laughing, inventing stories about superheroes who used sign language as their secret power. They ran across the center's small courtyard, hands flying mid-sentence without missing a step. Matteo stood beside Victor, both men watching in silence. "I've spent millions trying to build systems to support her," Victor admitted quietly. I never considered that what she needed most was another child who understood. Matteo nodded. Sometimes it's not about building something new. It's about making space. Over the following months, what began as occasional visits evolved into something larger. Victor invited Matteo to consult on inclusive programming within his foundation. At first, Matteo resisted. He didn't see himself as qualified, but Victor disagreed. You understand something experts don't, he told him. You live it. Matteo began helping design initiatives for families with hearing-impaired children, workshops that focus not only on therapy, but on community, on teaching parents sign language early, on creating playground meetups where no child felt isolated. For the first time since his wife's passing, Matteo felt something shift inside him. He wasn't just surviving, he was building. Nico noticed it too. He saw adults listening to his father, valuing his experience, seeking his perspective. Confidence bloomed in him in quiet, steady ways. Arya changed as well. With Nico, she wasn't the billionaire's deaf daughter. She was just a kid who loved drawing and superheroes. Victor changed perhaps most of all. He began redirecting funding within his foundation toward accessibility and inclusion programs, not out of obligation, but out of understanding. He realized wealth couldn't replace empathy, but it could amplify it. One bright afternoon, months after that first luncheon, Matteo stood in the very same garden where he had first noticed a little girl standing alone. This time, Nico and Arya were racing beneath the trees, sunlight filtering through the leaves as their laughter echoed freely. Hands moved mid-run, conversations never pausing. They were seen, fully. Matteo felt a quiet peace settle over him. Life had not erased his grief. It had not undone his struggles, but it had opened a door he never expected, all because he had chosen to see someone others overlooked. Victor joined him at the edge of the lawn. You changed your world that day, he said softly. Matteo shook his head. No, he replied. We changed each other's. In the distance, Arya stopped running and signed something dramatic to Nico, who responded with exaggerated hero poses that made her burst into laughter again. The sound carried warmly across the garden, and this time no one ignored it, because kindness, Matteo had learned, is a language all its own. One small action, one moment of courage, one choice to truly see another person. That's all it takes to begin changing a life.